Is there a better way to resemble hope than a kid's smile? This is a 5-year-old boy growing up in the mid-'80s, laughing because he's having a great life. He's doing so because his parents have the certainty that their children are growing up in a country full of opportunities. A country with a great healthcare system, best public education, great universities. A country where the GDP per capita is the highest in the region. A country where life expectancy was comparable to the developed world. That boy is me. And my country, Venezuela. Since I was a kid, I always dreamed to become a politician to serve the people. But trust me, I never had pictured that it would be like this. For over 20 years, conflict in Venezuela has increased. The democratic opposition has been persecuted, attacked, harassed, and even killed. In 2017, while we were celebrating the Independence Day in our parliament, criminals sent by the regime almost killed us. They attacked us, and I almost got killed. Venezuela, my country, is dying. But trust me, our struggle is not a struggle for power, but for life. The faces of our children nowadays look like this: hunger, despair. It's atrocious what is happening. We're in a country that is undergoing through major blackouts, hunger, famine, school drop-off. It's terrible. We're the most unhappy country in our region, according to the United Nations Global Happiness Index. We rank 108 out of 156 countries in the world. Italy ranks 36, by the way. And you could say, you might be asking yourselves, how did this happen? How a country so great, with full of talented people, so rich, ended up in such a mess? Well, I can tell you, it was the combination of wrong ideas and criminal minds. Most of you would think of this guy as the guy who blamed Nicolás Maduro, the current dictator. But let me take you into the past for a deeper understanding. History can illustrate us that it's a little bit more complex than this. So the year was 1959, and this picture reflects a moment of inflection, an inflection point in history for Latin America. Two models were pitched for the region. One was represented by the man on the left, Fidel Castro. He entered in Havana January 1959 after military victory against Fulgencio Batista, and his revolution was anti-democratic, violent, communist, but he was very charming. He was a very charismatic guy. He seemed to represent the romantic ideals of the 60s. The other guy, the one on the right, is Rómulo Betancourt. He was elected president in December 1958 after a 10-year dictatorship in Venezuela. He was not young. He was not charismatic at all. Some people say that he was grumpy, actually. But he was a true Democrat. So the fate of the region was divided in that moment when Castro, in that conversation, asked Rómulo Betancourt to finance the Continental Revolution with the Venezuelan oil. Rómulo Betancourt refused. And years after, Castro tried to invade Venezuela, in 1962 to be more exact. He failed. But this was not an isolated position by the Cuban army. Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces have had an interventionist position over the years. From 1959 to 1991, and from Syria to Panama, Nicaragua, Ethiopia, Angola, they have been there in a military way. So yes, they have been interventionists over the time. In the meanwhile, the Venezuelan model was based on education. There's a trend, there's this key feature. From 1959 to 1998, the Venezuelan model favored education in the budget over the military. This was a trend for 40 years. And things seems to go according to a development plan. They seem to go well. But eventually, Castro managed to put his hands on Venezuela, not through invasion, but through infiltration. So that's why a man prepared himself for 20 years, according to his mentor, ideas, according to revolutionary causes and models, and he managed to got into power in 1998. That man was Hugo Chavez. And to make a real long story short, I can tell you that he used his popularity and his charisma to unbuild, to dismantle democratic institutions from within and take control of the state-owned oil company, PDVSA. The outcome was the worst corruption scandal ever in the history. Over $3 billion were stolen, according to Jorge Giordani and Héctor Navarro, former ministers of Chavez. Yeah, you heard it right, 30 billion, not 30 million. 300. That's 20 times the Plan Marshall, which was used to rebuild Europe after the Second World War. But corruption was not the only game in town. So, mafia took over the state. For the first time in history, organized crime forged alliances with international superpowers, and they created what is called right now the mafia state, which is a system that tries to everybody to become accomplices of wrongdoing, but not citizens. They want everybody to be involved in wrongdoing. But we Venezuelans have the freedom, the seed of freedom in our blood. That's what we carry in our blood. And for 20 years, we have fought with courage and resilience. And that's what brought us to the point that we're in today. Over 20 years and thousands of massive demonstrations and over 20 electoral processes, we have resisted. We have been there, fighting, struggling. We have been unbreakable, persistent. Last year, in a failed attempt, in an election scam by Nicolás Maduro, in order to perpetrate himself into power, perpetuating power through scam elections, Juan Guaidó, the president of the National Assembly, represents the only constitutional exit for us Venezuelans. The interim government that he represents have a main objective: to lead a transitional process up to free and fair elections. I know nobody say that it's an easy process. And for the last month, it's been very difficult and very intense. Our situation is dramatic, but hope is there. Hope was born to stay. So, how can we nurture it? What can we do to keep it alive? What can we all do? Embrace democratic principles. Embrace democracy and do not take it for granted. Vote. Inform yourselves. Get in touch with your local politician. And if you don't like your local politicians, just start a movement and run for office. Don't take decisions based on rage or anger. Instead, be constructive. According to the United Nations, the international community has a responsibility to protect. And trust me, timing here is crucial in order to avoid mass atrocities. And for the leaders in the international community, please remember what Desmond Tutu said. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. We are Venezuela, and we want freedom. Libertad. Thank you very much.